try to take some of his points in order. First, a very small one, the Diane Sawyer point. I think she did say that when she saw the second plane go in, but I've seen the film, the only film there is, of the first plane going in. It's rather harder to see, and so you get the first words that are said in the post-9/11 era, or the immediate post-atrocity moment. And those words are spoken by a man on a big fire truck in New York, where the camera is mounted. And he says, can you guess? Yes, you can. Holy shit. And that was exactly a correct description of what was going on. Much more accurate than Diane Sawyer calling on God, which even I will do when I've run out of words, or above all, concepts. Yes, of course I'll say thank God. What else is there to say? I'll say it, if you like, as a courtesy, but don't over-attribute it. Now, had I said that philanthropy was poison, or charity was poison, I think you would have probably had me over a barrel. I say in my book, I give quite a lot of time to it, actually. I have a moment in Africa, in northern Uganda, where I was recently. I don't just sit in northwest Washington, as it happens, where I was doing the following thing. I was seeing the progress of probably the most cruel and horrible war, not just in Africa, but anywhere in the world, since, I should think, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. I think it outpaces the Darfur War in its horror and cruelty, if not in its scale, for this reason. You've probably heard of the Lord's Resistance Army of northern Uganda, and of its terrible leader, Mr. Joseph Kony, who wants to impose the rule of the Ten Commandments on Uganda. He's a former altar boy, and whose army is made up of kidnapped children who are turned into zombies and sadists at a very young age and sent out to kidnap other children to replenish the ranks. And there's a real evil to this because, of course, even the Acholi tribe, the people who suffer most from this ghastliness, don't want very rigorous measures taken against this terrifying little army of children for fear that their own kidnapped children will be killed. So it's a sort of double indemnity. And it's enormously retarded the recovery of Uganda in the name of God. And though it's a Christian force, very explicitly so, its paymasters are actually the Sudanese murderers who've commissioned the genocide in Darfur, because they want a revenge on Uganda for Uganda's help for the South Sudanese Liberation Army. So it's all a wonderful faith-based nightmare down there. And I was sitting in a camp where these children are gradually, some of them come in and give themselves up, some of them are captured, some of them get lost and are picked up. Terrifying children with guns and eyes of stone, who've learned so much about cruelty in such a short time that it shrivels your heart, being rehabilitated. And the people doing this were a rather fundamentalist, but very decent Christian group. Can't remember exactly which, the World Forum something. And I was sitting with the man who ran it and said, well, I'd like to ask you a question, as I said, as an unbeliever. Which of you do you think is the most sincere Christian? I mean, here's Mr. Kony, who really goes out and fights like an Old Testament man and says he's going to impose the law of his tribe and his people and his teachings on everyone. And he wants the Ten Commandments and nothing else. And there's you. And you're doing what any secular group could do. I mean, Amnesty International could be doing what he was doing. Not Amnesty International, in fact, but you know what I mean. Human Rights Watch, in fact, in Uganda is doing that and much more. And I know literally hundreds of secular missionaries and human rights workers who do what they do for its own sake, not to proselytize for a church or witness for a faith. Actually, to my surprise, the man took the question very seriously. He said, I often asked it myself. I don't know which of us is the real Christian. I have no means of knowing. Maybe it's Joseph Kony, maybe it's me. Well, you see, my case is the following. There really couldn't be another answer to that, because if you need a Christian or religious reason to do what you ought to be doing anyway for your fellow creatures, it seems to me at best superfluous, and at worst perhaps slightly, just very slightly, I don't mean to denigrate anybody's humane work, slightly suspect. Why would you need an extra reason? Hope I'm making myself plain here. Could it be proselytization? It very often is. Could it be the feeling that you yourself will get an eternal reward for it? Well, you're supposed to. Secularists who undertake this kind of work can't be suspected of this kind of thing, nor of trying to win converts. It seems to me it's an optional belief. By all means have it. What you've said is being done by any of the people you've mentioned is being done by religious Jews on the West Bank, though they want to bring on the Messiah and Armageddon and bring about the end of the world, and by Muslim groups everywhere. In fact, Hamas it justifies its whole rule in Gaza. disgusting dictatorship that it is by its provision of social services to the poor, the needy, or as Mother Teresa would always put it, the poorest of the poor. That's exactly their justification. The same is true of Hezbollah in Lebanon. If you lie it once, you lie it for everybody. It isn't an argument. It's barely even an observation. And when I said about evangelicals, I meant to say, and I said about a very revealing film which you may have seen about Marjo Gortner, the little boy who was put onto the preaching circuit by his parents. His name is an anagram of Mary and Joseph, and became one of the biggest tent draws around the country, a national superstar, while his life was ruined and exploited by these gruesome parents. And I don't know how it is then. There's a film made about it that everyone ought to see who's interested in this business. And if what I say is untrue about the racketeering nature of this business, why is it I only have to set my watch when I see someone like the Reverend Haggard, and I can tell you exactly when and how I'm going to see him in the news again? Why is it the case with these Chaucerian frauds, from Oral Roberts to, I can't remember, even their names give them away, onto the crack of doom, that it seems to be that it isn't actually Christianity that motivates it, but I don't blame Christianity for it either. Any more than many, many orphanages that have turned into rape rooms for clerics, with no child's behind left, as I like to phrase it. I don't say that's the fault of Christianity. I just say it proves to you that those who run orphanages say nothing and prove nothing about their religion. Now, to the point about Dr. Martin Luther King that you make, you skipped over the chapter I wrote about that too. If Dr. King, who was accused all his life and followed by the FBI on the proposition, you will remember, and denounced by its leader and by many others, for what he did in fact do, keeping company with secularists and socialists and leftists. You should remember this very well. We were all on the same side in those days. People like, not just people like Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph, the great black secularist union and socialist organizers who actually organized the March on Washington, but people more to the left than that, people in the Communist Party who, to their credit, did a great deal of work for civil rights. What does that say, the bravery of the Communist Party in the South, about communism? Nothing. It doesn't alter the fact that communism is a religion of slavery, does it? And Dr. King didn't preach Exodus. He preached the metaphor of Exodus. He said, my people should be let go and allowed their place in a promised land. Exodus says, your people are allowed to kill anyone who stands in their way and enslave those who you don't kill, especially the virgins, for your own purposes, and take their land. And God's on your side doing that. We wouldn't be praising Dr. King if he had said that about Exodus. If he'd taken that as his text, we would be thinking of him as a delusional, racist demagogue, which is why it is such a good thing that Israeli archaeology, that is a pretty sophisticated group of people they are too at that school, which has tried its natural hardest. You can believe they've tried their best to find any evidence at all for the wandering in Sinai or for the Exodus or for the original Jewish presence in Egypt. Cannot find a single shard of it. It's entirely fabricated, and we should be grateful for that fact.
About a minute, Mr. Hitchens.
All right. Can I have two? Just because I want to do a riposte.
Yes, of course.
And I want it to be ad hominem.
Absolutely. The ad hominem are the better.
Because I've also read some of Mr. Olasky's work. You may even remember my review of his book on presidential morality. It just expresses a worldview difference between us. I just feel one mustn't let that go. In writing about presidential morality, Dr. Olasky says that George Washington won the Revolutionary War because in the ranks of the Continental Army, cursing and drinking were forbidden, whereas in the ranks of the British Army, I've got to tell you, cussing and boozing was sort of rife. And I think your words, if I remember them correctly, I haven't had a chance to look them up, were godly policies brought forth victory. Now, here's the difference between us. I do not believe that God intervenes in human affairs. And I think it's rather profane. In fact, I think it's disgraceful to suggest that he does, especially when it's on your side. I will comment only that first, probably the Revolutionary War was won by the French Army and Navy, came in on our side at the crucial moment, in which I'm very sorry to say there was a good deal of boozing and expostulation. Second, Thomas Paine, certainly the most famous brandy drinker in American history, wrote the relevant documents that were read at Washington's order to the troops to stiffen the morale at Valley Forge, and carried a musket himself, soaked in the sauce as he was. Third, that my former fellow countrymen, smashed as they were and full of rude words, still managed to hold on to Canada, India, most of Africa, Australia, New Zealand, still cursing and boozing away, and beat every other army put into the field against them for many years afterwards, from China to Peru. Be very careful when you talk about virtue, of whatever kind it is in the world, human virtue, precious enough as it is. Be very careful not to degrade such examples of virtue and courage as we have by associating them with the supernatural. They don't require this defense. They may well suffer from it, and they will make the speaker look foolish. Thank you.